As the moon rose upon the sky, he'd awakened from his slumber. He couldn't sleep. But why so? As he fixed the cuffs wrapped around his paws, his gaze would begin to shift to the cats at the lower stage of the barn. He'd somewhat struggled to his paws. He wasn't a night owl, that was clear. He would jump down from his box, making his way towards the hay placed at the back of the barn. It appeared softer than his wooden crate that surprised him with splinters throughout the night. Maybe a change in scenery will do me well, he'd thought before beginning to trot towards the hay, his gait swift and confident. As his venture would end, he'd stare at the hay for a long while. He didn't see the enjoyment of sleeping tonight. Maybe I'm just hungry, he'd thought to himself. He turned to carefully strut down the wooden beam placed behind him. It wasn't exactly the safest way for his decline, but it was quick. He'd noticed the cat sat in front of him. He wasn't much of a talker, but he did know the importance in making connections. He'd tip his hat towards the tom before continuing down. As he made his way down the second beam, he noticed the large group of cats in front of him. They didn't appear to have a craving for sleep either. Strange, he thought. He made his way towards his usual settling place. He often joked this piece of rotten wood was offered to him by StarClan themselves. As the sunny gaze of the rising sun shone through the windows of the barn, his stomach grumbled. He was too tired to hunt alone. He wasn't exactly a skilled hunter. He could use the help of fellow barn cats, but that would mean talking to complete strangers. He decided his best chance was to find a cat on the way out. It would be less conflict, and so a bigger chance of finding some prey to sink his jaws into. He'd readjust his hat. He did enjoy the style of it being placed over his eyes, painted him more mysterious that way, but he had to make a good impression. He wasn't one to shy from a fight, but he hadn't ate in a few moons. His desperation grew stronger. He'd get to his paws once more. This was the best chance he had, especially with the welcoming weather and strong breeze. He'd somewhat interrupt the conversation with a loud yet low-toned, "Hey Hubble, how are ya?" he'd ask happily. He'd cast a smile towards the chatting cats. "I guess I might as well introduce myself." He'd shuffle at the ground beneath him. Although he had taken shelter in the barn for some time, he didn't exactly make his presence well known. "Are you new here? I've heard your name once or twice, but that's it," he said to the strange cat. "Awesome name and hat. We need more cats with hats here." He chuckled. He'd nod. You could say that. He wasn't too sure on how to keep this conversation alive. He much preferred to watch instead of talk, especially to such strange scented cats. He'd giggle. These cats certainly didn't know much of the clans he once called home, although he didn't want to dwell on his past. He was a barn cat now, and had to act as one. "Food!" He'd shout, starving. He'd finally get to the point. "Where do you hunt around here?" he'd ask in a somewhat apprehensive tone. Although the rabbit could fulfill his hunger, he would certainly prefer prey caught by his own accord. Felt like taking mossballs from a kit. "No one wants it. I'll eat it then," she'd say, walking over. He'd let out in a low grumble. "I guess I can give it a whirl." He'd nod in thanks to the cats before bounding outside the barn. It was sun-high, with a cooling breeze. He had to be careful on where he hunted. He didn't want his prey to catch wind of his scent. "I haven't. He was kind of just here one day." "He doesn't seem so lonerish?" "Nope. I'd be surprised," she'd say, surprised she didn't see him. She was more of an observer than a talker. "Maybe he's just warming up to this place." Seemed kind of like he was interrogating us, I won't lie. "So then, where did he come from?" "You're all too quick to assume. He's just getting to know us." I'm more of an observer than talker. But whatever, he's chill." That didn't work. As his paws carried him towards the suspected direction of prey, he'd continued to sniff the air. There must be a rabbit or a mouse somewhere hidden in the grass. He was aware this was WindClan territory, but the threat of being caught by a WindClan patrol didn't bother him too much. It would be a bit of entertainment after all. "Perfect," he'd mutter in a proud tone, his first proper catch as a loner. He'd glance to his right. A territory he knew like the back of his paw. A story in every rock and tree. He missed calling himself a RiverClan cat. He'd look at the current flowing under the bridge. He used to sit on the opposite side of this riverbank, wishing for more. But now all he wished for was his life back. A RiverClan warrior. He'd gaze upon his reflection in the water before giving a slight chuckle. He'd shake his head. He couldn't go back there. He wouldn't go back there. I'm a barn cat now. He'd yowl, his voice echoing through the trees. He'd claw his left paw to swoop at the water, some splashing back to hit his face. It had a distasteful scent to it. He'd pin his ears. This water was now claimed by the new cats of River Clan, not the clan he once knew. He'd snarl at the water. He had to keep his cool. He didn't want those barn cats to think he was insane. He'd take one deep breath, his lungs slowly rising then falling. He had to make his way back. On his journey back to the barn, he'd eye up the gathering stone. He knew he couldn't get a closer look, but he wasn't bound to the laws of a clan now, was he? He'd swiftly turn his head, left, then right, to ensure no cat would see him enter. It did appear to be clear. No one would notice. He'd mutter to himself, his eyes growing wide as an apprentice on the first day of training. He'd begin to move closer. It didn't appear to have changed too much from when he gathered here as an apprentice. He'd smile. The same flowers, untouched. The only thing that didn't appear to have changed in his life. He found great comfort in them. He'd shake his head. He had to make his way back to the barn. It was too risky to be here. A Wind Clan patrol could spot him easily if they marched in the open moors above. He'd continue his journey. The cold breeze had faded down as the last rays of the sun painted his pelt. He'd pause for a moment. It was clearly a barn cat. "What are you doing out here?" they asked, looking at him. "The others have been looking for you." He'd tip his hat. "Greetings," he'd meow, somewhat apprehensive of what the cat had to say. Were they following him? "Looking for me?" he'd ask in a confused tone. "Why? Am I needed for anything?" He'd avoid the question asked by the she. He didn't think it was her business to ask about his daily treks. "No, I don't know. I just heard them talking about you, and two went out looking for you," they said, not worrying about how he avoided their question. "I'm just heading back to the barn," the Tom would mumble. He'd shove past them before picking up his speed. "Weird," he'd mumble. Why did these cats appear to be so fascinated on him? Didn't they have better things to worry about? He'd hear distant chatting from the barn. Didn't appear to be as upbeat and friendly as it once was. For once, he was somewhat apprehensive of entering before he heard his name. They were certainly discussing things about him. But why? Why him of all cats? He had to figure this out. He'd begin to enter, his eyes darting from one section of the barn to another. He'd spot the cats gathered in the center. He'd mumble in a low volume. "Greetings. Where have you been?" he asked calmly. He felt the stares piercing his flank. He was unsure of how to respond. Maybe a lie would help de-escalate the situation? "I went hunting. In Wind Clan. I am certainly sure. I stepped no foot in River Clan territory." This was the truth, but it wasn't entirely true. He'd narrow his eyes. "And how do you know any difference?" He'd spit, losing his temper. "Have you adventured into River Clan territory?" He'd snort, his eyes alert as they darted from one cat to another. There was no way he could get out of the situation alive without telling the truth. He'd take a deep breath. "I used to be a River Clan cat," he'd begin, "but I left. I'm a rogue cat now." His shoulders tensed. "It wasn't long ago that I hunted in the rivers of River Clan. Its scent is still painted in my fur." "So, you want to go back?" "I never said that!" He'd spit. "Why do you all care anyway? I'm here now, aren't I? It wasn't exactly my choice. I scented this squirrel, and it took me to the riverbank outside River Clan. It was on impulse. I was hungry. A habit. I didn't mean anything from it. I promise." For once he sounded sincere. He'd pause for a moment. "Is that all?" He stood in a tense stance. "I left before." "Well, she made me. I didn't have a choice." "I'm going to eat this," he'd interrupt. Tension only made his appetite grow stronger. He'd push through the surrounding cats to make his way to his box. He'd sit, facing his back towards the cats. He'd sigh. This wasn't exactly what he expected, but anything was better than before he escaped River Clan. He'd curl into a more comfortable position before taking a large chunk of the rabbit to eat. He'd glance over his shoulder to check to see if the cats were still staring at him. He was exhausted. He hadn't had a proper sleep in moons. He'd begin to venture towards his claimed bed. He suddenly preferred the quietness of the upstairs of the barn. Much more peaceful. The chatting of the cats below was somewhat unbearable in the day. He'd begin to curl into a tight ball. He wasn't trusting of these barn cats or what they may do while he was vulnerable in his sleep. As the birds began to chirp, he'd slowly blink sleep from his eyes. This was the best sleep he had had in a moon. He'd noticed the cat beside him. Was that one of the cats from yesterday? He'd think to himself. He couldn't quite remember. But being cautious could be the difference between life and death. He'd slowly make his way around them. His gaze locked on their movements. He'd peer down to the cats at the lower level. They didn't appear to be awake. It was best to leave the discussions of last night till later. He'd blink to the cat beside him. "I'm fine." He'd meow in a quick response. "I best be on my way," he'd continue before brushing past them. He'd glance towards Macaw. He'd remembered him, not the friendliest of cats for sure. He'd snort. Why was he treated as lesser than the dirt they walked on? He couldn't easily change their minds, but a gesture could surely soften the impact. "Hubble? He'd meow, looking towards Mouse. "I just wanted to apologize about last night. Your life is yours and we can't control you." He sighed. This wasn't easy to do. He felt somewhat taken back by the cat's response. With some hesitation, he responded, "Thank you." He'd awkwardly stare at the cat before continuing out of the barn. He'd hop onto the white painted fence that bordered the barn. He'd take a moment to find his balance. Trying to entertain himself, he'd hobble along the fence. He felt like a kid again. He'd let out a childish chuckle. He'd smile. "Hey, Oak!" He'd remember where he was, quickly casting a glance around him. His childish whimsy would turn as he thought. He sat on a post. "Yeah, they're quiet," and he thought of any other reasons, but didn't. "You are quiet, Tom," he purred playfully, but part of him did agree with Onyx. "But they're suspicious," he protested sarcastically. He sat and thought for a brief moment. "They look rather alone, don't you think?" She rose to her paws, carefully walking across that plank. "Hey, usually she was quite good at conversation, but it was a bit awkward after gossiping about him just days ago." He'd turn his gaze towards the cat. Why did they want to talk to him? He'd stay quiet, listening intently. "I'm sorry about what happened yesterday." His shoulders tensed at the thought of that night. His new home could be turned into a memory of the past. He continued to stay quiet, unsure of how to respond or their intentions. "I talked with others about your origins, but none of us intended to pry into it, at least initially. If you want me to leave alone, I'll go, you know?" He turned his attention towards the sun as it rose in the sky. "I came here to forget about my past, not storytell it to others." He'd meow in an aggravated tone. "But I can't hold grudges on cats that share an interest." He'd sigh, facing towards them. "After a while, I'm sure the others will not be as tense as they are now. How about we start over? I guess I'll introduce myself the way I want to be known." He'd proudly lift his head. "I'm Hubble. Some cats call me boring and quiet, but that's how I like it." He'd purr. "I'm not afraid of conflict. And yet, I don't prefer it. I used to be a brave and trustworthy cat, but I can't forget my roots. No matter how hard I try to be a different cat, they always follow me," he'd admit. "But my struggles make me who I am. I'm not my mother, nor my brother. I'm a cat who cats question their motives. I am a cat who enjoys a challenge. I am Hobble." He'd finished before sitting down again on a post. Romula grinned. "That's the spirit. And if the others may treat you like that, prove that you're better than that. Prove you're Hubble." He'd nod. "Thank you." He purred before making his way back into the barn. He felt a sense of persistence. If these cats were so interested in his life, he'll tell them, but by his story. He'd proudly strut to Macaw, lifting his head to face him directly. "Macaw," he'd meow. "You want to know who I am so desperately? Then how about you ask me, instead of those who gossip about my very existence?" Hubble," she would say nervously. She'd look surprised. "I was gonna apologize, but, she'd say with a loss of words. He'd smile, somewhat understanding Macaw. He waited patiently, passion glowing from the glints in his eyes. "Anyways, why are you even talking to me? Wouldn't you want to not talk to me?" He'd tilt his head. "I wanted to make things straight. If I'm going to stay here, then I need to have trust in you all." "You know what? Sorry, Hubble," she'd say. "I really just wanted to fit in. That's why I did it," she'd say, surprised she'd even admit it. "Well, you know where to find me if you ever want to understand where I come from." He'd nod in respect before turning to face the two cats muttering behind him. "Greetings." Burrow purred in greeting, dipping his head. He'd sit in front of them, curling his tail over his paws. "Hello," he'd meow, feeling confident in his newfound conversation skills. He certainly wasn't perfect, but it was an improvement. An improvement that needed to happen if he was to stay in the barn. I see you look more pleased to be here than the other day, he drawled, observing the Tom in front of him. I'm glad. I've heard my name being mentioned when you two appear to talk quite frequently, he'd ask, trying to understand them both. Onyx here, he gestured with a flick of his tail, doesn't trust easily. He'd nod. Well, I am a stranger after all. I don't expect to be welcomed with open paws. I just want to call this barn my home. As long as you don't hurt the cats I care about, I'm sure we'll get along greatly. He'd nod his head before flicking his tail and strutting away. Certainly was an improved atmosphere from yesterday.